All right, welcome back. We are going to be covering Exodus 17 and 18 today. Going to be covering some familiar stories, I think, to many of us. Nothing completely earth-shattering this time, so it should be a relatively short segment here, even though we're going to still do two chapters. Chapter 17 is a short chapter anyway, so we've covered that. There are a few names in here. I've got those all pulled up and ready to look at as we cover them, but we're gonna hit chapter 17 and 18 tonight. As always, I'm reading out of the King James. I got my big cup back. I've been drinking out of a Sonic cup, but I got my big cup back because my Sonic cup died. So I'll be reading out of the King James, the ESV up for some modern word usage if we need it, and of course I've got the Hebrew lexicon here up, especially for all these names I'm going to be looking at tonight. So thank you for joining us, and drop a comment if you like, and if you are finding these Bible studies to be useful, feel free to share them, and we're going to post it up on YouTube as we can. So thank you for joining us tonight. Stephen, welcome. Zachary, welcome. Glad to have you guys here with us tonight. So, all right, so let's get started here. Exodus chapter 17, starting in verse 1. And all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin. And remember, we talked about this last time. That sin there was thorny, clay-filled ground. It's not sin in the typical sense that we think of it, which is transgression of God's law. So it says, they journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys, according to the commandment of Jehovah, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. So Rephidim is the first of our names, and it just means a resting place or a place where they stayed. Very simple name. Cool. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that feedback. I need to know that. I did an Audacity test before I got started tonight to make sure my mic was up and running. So. All right, verse 2, wherefore the people did chide with Moses. Here we go again. They're complaining again. Remember, now they've been traveling. We're well past a month of time here where they left Egypt. So the people are chiding with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why chide you with me? That chide there it's a pretty... They're being mean about it. Moses is about to say, hey, they're about ready to stone me for this. So why chide you with me? Wherefore do you tempt Jehovah? So that idea of tempting there is trying his patience. And the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? Oh, the drama. Man, this is like a nation of drama queens. They are all of the things that God has done for them, and they get to a place where they set up camp and there's no water, and we're all gonna die. We should go back to Egypt. And it's just like, children is the right word. Children of Israel. That is an apt name for these guys. So, all right. Moses, verse 4. Moses cried unto Jehovah, saying, what shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me. And so Moses cries. He says, look, God, really, these guys are, what am I going to do with them? They're so mad about this little inconvenience. They're about ready to stone me. And Jehovah said unto Moses, go on before the people and take with thee of the elders of Israel. Now the elders the elders of Israel are the leaders of the tribes. So you've got the 12 tribes there, but remember, there's two half-tribes of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, so they each have a leader there. And then you also have, you're going to, not at the moment, because they haven't got to that point yet, but you have the Levites are going to have representation through the priesthood. And so, and we're going to see a little bit about the governance of the nation being set up here. This is the beginning. What we talk about tonight is the beginning of this nationhood and their laws and their civics and whatever. And remember, Israel is a theocracy. So their religion, their practices regarding their faith and everything are all tied up in their governance and in their military. All of those things are all tied together. in this theocracy. And so it's very important to get that big picture as we read through this. So, but anyway, he says, take with thee the elders of Israel in verse 5, and thy rod wherewith thou smote the river, and take thine hand and go. Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock. Now that's important. Here at Horeb, God tells Moses to smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. And I know, right? It brought us up to kill us. Yeah, because that's what God is doing here. What a bunch of drama queens. So, verse 7, and he called, this is Moses, and he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the chiding of the children of Israel, and because they tempted Jehovah, saying, is Jehovah among us or not? And so, anyway, the name Massah is temptation, because that's where they tempted the Lord, the idea of trying his patience. And then Meribah, which is strife or contention, because they threatened Moses there. So, given these names based on what's happening there to remind them, if the children of Israel ever come back this way, they will be reminded because of what the name means. Remember, all of these names of people, names of places, they all have meanings. It's kind of a fun thing to look back at the history of our own names and think about what they mean, but it's very rare today, at least here in America, where we name somebody because of the root meaning of what the name is. Why did I name my son Cade? I named him because that's a character out of my novels. I named him that because I'd been using that name online because it sounded cool. It didn't have anything to do with the meaning of the name Cade. Same thing with Guinevere. If you know anything about the history of the character of Guinevere in the Arthurian legends, may not have been the best choice if that's the only thing you consider, but it is a beautiful name, and it actually means winter fairy. There are other places where Guinevere has been used in the Gaelic lore, and there's actually a country song that uses that name. So, there's some things that we take into consideration, but really most people are named, at least in my experience, based on either like a family thing or just because the name sounds cool, or that we like the name, or we like the word that represents that name. But in the Old Testament, a lot of these names are given because they have meaning. So these would be reminders of the children of Israel of the time. You guys remember that time when we came out of Egypt and y'all were being drama queens? Yeah, that's the Massah and the Meribah. That's where that happened. So. All right, so they set up there, and Massah trial, and Meribah quarrel. Yeah. So, right. So mom is referring to Numbers 20, where later Moses is told to speak to the rock, and here at Horeb he's told to strike the rock. But in Numbers, Moses strikes the rock again, which is not what God commanded him. So even though God didn't say don't strike the rock, God told him what to do. Moses did something else, and in doing something else, Moses was punished. He was not allowed to enter into the promised land because of that disobedience. And there's a lesson to be learned in that. Mom, I'm glad you brought it up. The lesson to be learned is in the New Testament. There are certain ways that God has told us to worship him. He's told us to worship him through prayer and through the partaking of the Lord's Supper and through the study of the Word to give of our means. 1 Corinthians 16 and 2 Corinthians 8, the way that we're supposed to give as a remembrance and a thanksgiving for God giving us Christ. And then in song. And he even gives us the purpose of singing. Why do we sing? It's not to entertain ourselves. We sing and worship to God and to teach one another. There's this idea of teaching and admonishing one another with songs and hymns and spiritual songs and speaking and making melody in our hearts. When God has commanded that, and we go do something else, and that whether it be using mechanical instruments or whether it be clapping or whether it be any of these other things that mankind has added, we are no different than Moses being told, speak to the rock, and Moses striking the rock. Well, why couldn't it be okay for Moses to strike the rock? He'd done it before. Why can't it be okay for us to use mechanical instruments? They did it in the Old Testament. That's not the way that it works. So, Ron, thank you for bringing that up. So, Stephen, like your name, huh? Well, I was named after my dad, and he was named in part after his dad. So, but my name, Ernest, is actually a word that's still kind of around and in use today. So it's not hard to understand what that means. All right, verse 8, 17 verse 8. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. So Amalek, if you remember, probably not, these genealogies get thrown at us, but he was the son of Eliphaz and the grandson of Esau. So he is an Edomite. And so the Amalekites are offsprings of Edom or Esau, and they go out and they're their own nation now. Remember, we've had some time to pass, and the patriarchal system is transmogrifying into these nation states, these city states, or these nation states here, where they have lots of people now. And so Amalek isn't the person, Amalek is the nation now. And so the Amalekites came out and they fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men and go and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said unto him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and he took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon, and Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And this is an interesting picture here. First of all, the Israelites haven't done anything. They're out wandering in this wilderness area, and the Amalekites come to them and pick a fight. And that alone is going to get them into trouble later on. We'll see the curse here in a minute, but then we'll see it as we progress through the Pentateuch here that they get in major trouble for doing this because it was unprovoked. It was an unprovoked attack. But then we have the familiar story of Moses lifting up his hands, and as long as his hands were in the air, he was winning. The Israelites were winning. And if his hands drooped because he got tired, then they started to lose. And you have the help of Aaron and Hur on either side holding up his hands. So Moses is this great leader, but even as a great leader, he needed help. He needed the support and the caring of those who were close to him. Joshua is down at the battle. Of course, Joshua is kind of Moses' successor, but he's down in the battle right now as a younger man. And Aaron and Hur are on either side of Moses, and they're helping him hold up his hands. And just the idea there is, as we can, when our leaders are doing what is right, we should support them in the best way that we can. And I'm talking about in the church primarily, because when I look at the people who lead the congregation, our elders, whether you call them elders or shepherds or bishops or whatever, those guys that are in office that have the rule over us according to Hebrews 13, they need to be supported and not be troubled the way that the Israelites troubled Moses. When we talk about our government, at least here in America, I don't see them as leaders so much as I see them as public servants. So I don't tend to talk about our government public servants as our leaders. They don't lead us. They're supposed to follow our desires in running this nation. So, but anyway, just the idea here of seeing even Moses needing help, and Moses is getting on up in years. He's over 80 years old. He's late midlife now, and he's gonna get tired holding his hands up all day long. And so these two guys stand by him and they support him. So, all right, cool. So I'm checking back and forth for comments because I don't have the way that my phone does it is different when and now that I'm doing it on my computer with my webcam. So, All right. Verse 13, and Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And Jehovah said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. So here the Amalekites have come. They've attacked in an unprovoked manner the Israelites. And God says, I am going to wipe them from existence. I will put them out of remembrance from under heaven. Wow. These are the first. This is the first nation after they left Egypt. This is the first nation. Nothing to do with Egypt. Nothing to do with the Israelites. They just come and pick a fight, and for that, God says, "I'm going to wipe them off the face of the earth. And they won't even be remembered by anyone." Of course, we have it recorded here in the Old Testament, so that's a different thing. But just the idea of the nation itself, it was going to be so thoroughly thrashed because of what they did unto the Israelites, and that does come about. So Moses built an altar, and he called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. And Jehovah Nissi is Jehovah is my banner. Okay. And for he said, verse 16, for he said, because Jehovah has sworn that Jehovah will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. In other words, Amalek was going to have the full focus of a wrathful God is now focused on Amalek for what Amalek does. And this is the first of those wicked nations that, why did they do it? They're bad guys. And they deserve to be wiped out because of their wickedness. And they proved it. It wasn't that God just came in and trounced them because they were there. They attacked the Israelites unprovoked. And God ended the nation, drove the people out, and completely ended them as a nation. That doesn't mean he killed everybody, but it does mean that the nation was ended. So, all right, that brings us to chapter 18. When Jethro, this is Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, and that Jehovah had brought Israel out of Egypt, then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back. So Moses, in the very first part of Exodus, when he started going at Pharaoh with this message from God, sent his wife home with his 2 young sons. Said, you need to get out of here. Things are about to get dicey. Send them home. And so now Jethro has come back, and he brings Zipporah and these 2 young men with him. Well, I say young men. By this time, they're probably, they might even be getting close to marriage age themselves. So, verse 3, and her 2 sons, of which the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been an alien in a strange land. Gershom just means sojourner. And then the name of the other was Eleazar, for the God of my father said he was mine help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. So Eleazar is actually one of those easier ones. I don't know if y'all have ever... there's a song, Here I Raise My Ebenezer. The name Ebenezer means stone of help. So, we think Christmas Carol and Ebenezer Scrooge, but the ironic thing there is Ebenezer means stone of help. And I'm sure Lewis Carroll I think it was Lewis Carroll that wrote that, yeah. Chose that name on purpose. But Ezar is help, and El, of course, is always God. Just the idea of God or creator, or that potent force that made everything. Well, not force, but the being that created the universe, as opposed to the personal God, Jehovah, which is his name. And so El and Azar, God, helper. And I don't know. Just I like studying language, and I like studying names and stuff, and so that. Wherever it comes to one that I can just pick out without having to actually look it up, it's pretty cool. So anyway, verse 5, and Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses into the wilderness, where he encamped at the mount of God. And he said unto Moses, I, thy father-in-law Jethro, am come unto thee, and thy wife and her 2 sons with her. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and did obeisance, and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare, then came into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that Jehovah had done unto Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the travail that had come upon them by the way, and how Jehovah had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness which Jehovah had done unto Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, now pay attention to this, Blessed be Jehovah, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptian, out of the hand of Pharaoh, who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Jehovah is greater than all gods. Okay, that's not to say that Jethro, who was already a priest, he already worshipped Jehovah. It doesn't necessarily mean that Jethro didn't understand that in the textbook sense, but having seen all of these things, he now had that evidence that showed what God could actually do. And I think that's the thrust of what he's saying here. Not that he worshipped other gods or he thought other gods were real, but just now it's been confirmed to him that he was making the right choice by being the high priest of Jehovah for Midian. Okay? So, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them. In other words, the Egyptians were very haughty. They were very into their gods, and they used those gods to lord over everyone else. Our gods are better than your gods. Look at us. We're Egypt. We're a strong nation. Remember, Egypt is one of the first true nations in the world. And they've been a nation where everybody over here in the Middle East has mostly been these nomadic families and very small cities and whatnot with just a few thousand people in them. Egypt's a mighty place. And so their gods, that's what they did, is they said, our gods are great. Look at how much we've been blessed by all these gods. And Jehovah comes along and says, your gods are nothing. They're fake. And let me show you. And so Jethro's like, yeah, he showed us. And there's obviously no one more powerful than Jehovah. So I like that. Yeah, is my banner. Yeah. That is spoken like a boss. Well, God is boss. So, yeah. So, yeah, Yeshua, Joshua, Jesus, Jehovah, all of that. Exactly so, Brian. Those names are all related. Like I said, I love the study of names and stuff. I don't demand. I use the word Jehovah here because I think it's silly that people don't use his name. That the Israelites or the Jews later on had this tradition where they would even put a hyphen between G and D because they thought that the word God, which isn't even his name, was too holy to actually spell or to say. And they changed, like the King James, everywhere it says the Lord, I'm automatically translating that to Jehovah because in most cases that's what it is. When the word Lord is all caps in the King James, it's actually not Adonai, it's actually Jehovah. And so I say his name because I think that's important, but I'm not, if you want to use Yahweh, great. If you want to use Jehovah, great. If you want to Jehovah from the Latin, however you want to say it or whatever, we're all talking about the same person, the same being here. So, but the names are important, right? And I think that it's important to use them. All right. Verse 12, and Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came, and all the elders of Israel, to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. So I'm imagining anywhere from 12 to 13 men beyond Moses and Jethro, and probably Aaron, Hur, Joshua. There's these people here. It's a fairly large gathering, but we're not talking hundreds of people. In my mind, when I was younger, when I heard the elders of Israel, I'm thinking 600,000 people just coming out of Egypt. That's got to be hundreds of people. Well, that's not actually what happens. You have the patriarchs, are the elders or the leaders of each of those 12 tribes, and so it's probably kind of an Arthur and the Round Table kind of idea here. And Moses is the leader, and then you've got Aaron, and you got Joshua, and then you've got the 12 patriarchs there. So that's about the extent of the elders or the leaders here. And all the elders, so verse 12, and all the elders to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people And the people stood by Moses from the morning unto evening. So this is an all-day thing where Moses is just sitting there hearing people complain. And Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, and he said, What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning unto evening? Jethro's looking at him going like, Are you insane? Why are you the only one doing this? And Moses said unto his father-in-law, Because the people come unto me and inquire of God. They need to talk to God, and God talks to me, so I'm gonna handle their problems. Moses is not that big of a thinker here, is he? He needs to learn to delegate. And I like how Jethro approaches this too. So Jethro's going to give him an idea, but then he's going to say, if God wills it, he says, if God is okay with this, you should do it this way. So verse 16, when they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one and another, and I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws. So Moses is already handing out these ideas of how God wants specific things to be handled. These are verbal, oral commands that are going to be written down. So we're not getting anything. Moses isn't going to hand out anything that was important enough that isn't written down in these first 5 books anyway. But they just haven't got to that point yet. So he's sitting there in judgment, just kind of like in the first century during the New Testament. We didn't have the New Testament where we could run down to Walmart and buy us a New Testament or buy us a Bible and know what the law of Christ is, which is what the New Testament is. They didn't have that. Paul writes a letter, there's one copy of that letter. And until scribes can copy that by hand, they didn't have printers, and disseminate those handwritten copies, they didn't have those. And so they had oral teachings for a while. And so we're seeing the same thing going on here. All right. And verse 17, and Moses' father-in-law said unto him, The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou shalt surely wear away both thou and this people that is with thee. For this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. So he's just giving him some wisdom here. Hearken now unto my voice. I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. So Jethro's like, look, first of all, give them some laws, give them some ordinances, some things that they need to live by, and they need to learn them, and then live by them. Okay, that'll solve a lot of your problems just right from the beginning. Okay, show them what they're supposed to do in their everyday life. This is for us. This would be like traffic laws and economic laws, and if there's a dispute between two people, like a contract dispute or something, or a fight or something like that, how is that supposed to be handled before the laws? There's a lot of those laws that we learn just by living life. People teach us, the school systems teach us, or our parents hopefully are teaching us. There's a number of things, but we have to learn them. It's our responsibility as citizens of this nation to learn those laws, and if they are not evil laws, remember, God's law supersedes human law, so as long as they are not evil laws, we're obligated to follow those. And so, anyway, Jethro's like, just teach them what they're supposed to do. And then verse 21, he continues, he says, Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God. That's important. That fear there, that word is the idea of respect, having awe towards God. It's not like a trembling, like, God's going to punish me. It's the idea of having a respect towards God and knowing what God can do, and respecting his power and his authority. Men of truth, hating covetousness. In other words, they can't be guys that are greedy. They can't be ones that are willing to steal from other people. Because if you have dishonest men, oh wait, politicians. Yeah. So if you elect men, you get our government. They hate covetousness and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. So there you have your hierarchy. You have the federal government and Moses acting on behalf of God, and then you have all the way down to your local government, to small groups of people and stuff, and how they're supposed to work. And then, of course, the smallest unit is the family unit. And so he's setting up this administrative bureaucracy to help Moses with the day-to-day stuff. It says in verse 22, and let them judge the people at all seasons, and it shall be that every great matter they shall bring to you. So there's this process of appeal and whatever that they had to finally get to Moses. But every small matter they shall judge, so it shall be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee. So Moses doesn't need to hear all the little detail type stuff. This guy, he owes me a pot of wheat. He borrowed a pot of wheat from me yesterday, and he hasn't paid me back. Moses doesn't need to hear stuff like that. That's silly stuff. He needs to be handling just the big stuff. And then you have these other guys that are within the tribes, within the thousands and hundreds and tens, who handle those smaller and smaller matters depending on what sphere of authority they're given. So Moses did as Jethro said, and they judged the people at all seasons. The hard causes they brought unto Moses, the hard causes they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way into his own land. I'm fairly certain that's the last time we hear about Jethro. Don't know how old he was, don't know how old he was when he died. But a fairly wise man, and I think somebody that Moses really respected. And the idea that Jethro is like, look, if God is okay with this, you need to do something to delegate, because you are going to get worn out trying to run this whole nation as a true monarchy, right? True monarchies don't really exist, do they? We have oligarchies in the world where one person is put up as the figurehead, or somebody who is the executive, and then the people that are subordinate to them are support. They're people there that run the government from day to day, and then the executive, if they're a strong executive, a strong king or queen, they make actual decisions and whatever, like Moses did, or perhaps they're just a figurehead like the English monarchy is today. And it's very, very difficult to have a true single dictator, because it's just one person, and no one person is really all that strong. Even Hitler, and I use Hitler in terms of his strength and his power and the fear that he had. Hitler did not do World War II and all of the horrible things that he did alone. There's no way he had that kind of power as a singular man. He had his group. And so, for good or ill, it is important, if a government is to exist, that it is run by capable, God-fearing, honest people, for it to run well, for the government to run well. And unfortunately, we're going to see that the Israelites are just as susceptible to all the evils and ills that all of the other nations, including our own, are subject to. So, anyway, like I said, tonight's was a fairly straightforward one, and I think it had some good lessons in it, but nothing just mind-blowing, nothing that we're looking too far forward to. So let's take a look at some of the comments here, and then we'll probably head on out. So Brian says they still do the G-D thing today. Yeah, I know, it's super silly, since Yahweh never forbade saying his name. Yeah, I agree. Yahweh never forbade anyone from saying his name. He said, my name is holy. And then, as the Pharisees especially are prone to do, they take what God says and then they take it a step further. God says my name is holy, and the Pharisees, oh, well, we're all unholy and we're not worthy of saying his name, so we're not even allowed to say his name, we're not allowed to write his name or whatever, so we're gonna kind of fake it. Well, what happens if you stop saying the name of Jehovah God? If you stop saying, well, my God's name is Jehovah, well, people stop, they don't spread who it is. They say the God of the Israelites or the God of the Jews or whatever, but that puts the glory really partly on the Jews and partly on the Israelites, and they don't give the glory to God, who is Jehovah. And I think it's super important. I think it's very, very important that his name be known and spread. And what did Moses say when he was first going to Pharaoh? Who should I say sent me? And what does he say? Tell them I am the self-existent one. That's essentially what Jehovah means. Tell them I am sent. Tell them this is what my name is. So let's see here. Stephen says, really wish the translators would put Yahweh, Yahweh or Jehovah. I'm okay with either of those because translations are fine. Some do in the Old Testaments. I don't think Yahweh was actually ever written in the Greek New Testament. No, I don't believe it was either. I think maybe once or twice, Brian. There's a couple of places, and I think it's actually drawing on the Hebrew at that point. And yeah, they use the Greek Kyrios. Moses, I've had this hanging out for 2 days. Yeah, so they come to Moses with these little dinky things, and they're like, why are you bothering Moses with this kind of stuff? So, all right, guys, it's been a great night. I appreciate you joining me. It took us a little over, 35 minutes is where we're at. So, good session. I told you it'd be short, and I appreciate you being here. Please share. I'll have it up on YouTube eventually. Still got to re-record the one from earlier, I think Exodus 13 through 15, but I'm going to go hang with the kids for a little bit and hopefully put them to bed soon. So y'all have a great evening.